Hold up. Did Kendrick Lamar just take a shot at Drake live on one of the biggest stages in the world? The Super Bowl halftime show had everything. Electrifying performances, jaw-dropping visuals, and now, possibly, the latest chapter in hip-hop's most subtle yet simmering rivalry. Fans were left stunned as Kendrick seemingly threw a cryptic jab at Drake, sparking a wildfire of speculation. But was it a direct diss, a misunderstood lyric, or just social media doing what it does best? Let's break down what happened, the history behind the tension, and whether this is the moment that finally ignites a full-fledged lyrical battle. The incident. Kendrick's Super Bowl moment that shook the internet. It started like any other high-energy halftime show. Flashing lights, roaring crowds, and some of the biggest names in music owning the stage. But then, in a moment that no one saw coming, Kendrick Lamar dropped a line that sent shockwaves through the internet. At first, it seemed like just another masterful verse from the Pulitzer Prize-winning rapper. But something about this moment felt different. Maybe it was the way he delivered it, sharp, deliberate, with that unmistakable tone that hip-hop heads know all too well. The audience inside the stadium was too caught up in the spectacle to catch it in real time. But the internet? Oh, the internet caught everything. Within minutes, social media was ablaze. Clips of Kendrick's performance were being replayed, slowed down, analyzed frame by frame. Some fans were convinced this wasn't just a bar. This was a direct shot at Drake. Others weren't so sure, arguing that people were reaching, twisting lyrics that could mean anything. But here's where things got really interesting. The energy in the stadium shifted, subtle but undeniable. Some of Kendrick's own fans in the front row reacted, pointing at each other like, did he just say what I think he said? Even some of the celebs in the VIP section raised their eyebrows. And then came the real bombshell. Drake's camp was in the building. As the performance ended, cameras panned across the crowd, and eagle-eyed viewers spotted a few familiar faces. Industry insiders, OVO affiliates, people who just might have been sent to keep tabs. One moment, in particular, went viral. A well-known Drake associate seen pulling out his phone the second Kendrick's verse hit. What was he doing? Recording receipts? Texting Drake? Plotting a response? By the time the halftime show wrapped, Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, had turned into a full-blown war zone. Kendrick just dissed Drake on the biggest stage in the world, started trending within minutes. Fans were already taking sides. Was this just a lyrical flex? Or was Kendrick finally saying what he's been holding back for years? And the biggest question of all, would Drake respond? Stay locked in. We're breaking down the fallout, the history behind the tension, and what happens next. Because if this is what it looks like, we might be witnessing the start of hip-hop's next legendary feud. The fallout. What happened after Kendrick's Super Bowl verse? The second Kendrick Lamar stepped off that stage, the internet exploded. But while fans were busy dissecting his lyrics, things were already in motion behind the scenes. Let's start with what happened immediately after the performance. Sources inside the stadium say that some of Kendrick's team were all smiles, like they knew exactly what they just set in motion. But over in the VIP section, Drake's people weren't laughing. One eyewitness claimed that OVO affiliates left their seats before the show even ended, as if they were on their way to make some calls. And then there was the moment that sent conspiracy theorists into overdrive. A well-known industry insider tweeting just 2 words, "It's war," minutes after Kendrick walked off stage. Coincidence? Maybe. But things got even crazier once the celebrity reaction started rolling in. LeBron James posted a cryptic tweet right after halftime. Y'all heard that? With the side-eye emoji. J. Cole, usually quiet on rap beefs, liked a tweet that said, Kendrick really set the tone for 2025 with that one. DJ Academics went live on Twitch immediately, saying his sources confirmed that Drake was already in the studio working on a response. And this is where things took a turn, because within 2 hours of Kendrick's performance, something wild happened. Drake unfollowed Kendrick on Instagram. Now, in 2025, we all know unfollowing is basically the new age diss track. It's a public move that sends a message. I see you, and I'm done pretending we're cool. And let's be real, Drake is strategic. He doesn't do anything on social media by accident. At the same time, hip-hop blogs started posting screenshots of Kendrick's longtime producer liking shady comments about Drake. It was clear. This wasn't just fan speculation anymore. There was real tension behind the scenes. But here's the biggest plot twist. Just as fans were bracing for a response from Drake, a leaked snippet hit the internet. A 15-second clip of what sounded like Drake in the studio, rapping over a menacing beat with one line standing out. "You're not the only one with a Pulitzer, boy. I write too." The internet went into full meltdown mode. Was this a direct response? Was this AI? And if it was real, was Drake really firing back this fast? While fans argued, one final bomb dropped. A close friend of Kendrick's posted a single fire emoji on Instagram, then deleted it. Now, in hip-hop, we know deleting posts is a classic move when you've said too much. So now, all eyes were on Kendrick. Would he double down? Would Drake escalate? And most importantly, was this just the beginning of hip-hop's biggest beef since Drake versus Meek Mill? The next 48 hours were crucial. Would Drake drop a full diss track? Would Kendrick respond again? And what does this mean for the future of rap? Stick around, because this is just getting started. Kendrick versus Drake, a history of tension. Let's set the stage, because understanding the history behind Kendrick Lamar versus Drake isn't just about beefing. It's about two artists who have fundamentally shifted the direction of hip-hop, pushing the boundaries in ways that many didn't think were possible. But from the moment their careers crossed paths, the world has been waiting to see how the tension between them would unfold. So, how did this rivalry begin? Was it a slow burn, or did it explode overnight? Let's rewind the clock and break down the first sparks of their conflict. The early years, mutual respect or silent competition. The story doesn't start with an open confrontation, or even a diss track. It starts with two young artists, Kendrick Lamar, a rising star from Compton, and Drake, the Canadian actor turned rapper, both making waves in the hip-hop scene at the same time. But don't be fooled by their early respect for each other. It's not as simple as it seems. When Drake dropped his So Far Gone mixtape in 2009, he was already creating waves. With his unique blend of singing and rapping, Drake was reshaping the sound of hip-hop and bringing in an era of emotional vulnerability. Meanwhile, Kendrick was starting to gain critical acclaim for his storytelling, social commentary, and thought-provoking lyrics. Both artists were seen as the future of rap, but each with very different approaches, and that's where the tension starts to simmer under the surface. At first, they didn't necessarily have beef, but you couldn't help but notice the competing narratives. While Drake was becoming the mainstream icon, Kendrick was gaining respect in the underground, establishing himself as one of the most intelligent and impactful lyricists in hip-hop. But the competition was inevitable. The 2013 BET Cypher, the first shot fired. Now, this is where things begin to shift. 2013, a year that marks one of the most talked about moments in the Kendrick versus Drake saga. It wasn't in a song. It wasn't in an interview. It happened in the most unexpected of places, the BET Hip Hop Awards Cypher. In this particular cypher, Kendrick Lamar dropped a verse that shook the rap world to its core. He famously declared, "I'm usually homeboys with the same N*** I'm rhyming with. But this is hip-hop, and them N*** as should know what time it is." He didn't name anyone directly, but everyone knew who he was talking about. The line was clearly a call-out to the big names in the rap game, including Drake. For some fans, this was the moment Kendrick officially threw down the gauntlet. Was Kendrick taking shots at Drake? Was it a call for competition? Or was it simply a statement of intent, a challenge to anyone who thought they were better than him? The response from Drake? Silence. At first, he didn't respond directly. He didn't have to. Kendrick had set the stage, and now the world was waiting to see how both artists would respond. This moment was the first crack in the facade, and the world was watching. The Control verse, a game-changer in the beef. Then came the Control verse in 2013, when Kendrick Lamar made waves again, this time on Big Sean's track. This verse wasn't just a challenge. It was a declaration of war. In that verse, Kendrick called out nearly everyone in the rap game, from J. Cole to Drake, saying, "I'm the king of New York, king of the coast, one hand up like the Eiffel Tower." But the line that had everyone talking was, "I'm trying to murder you in *********************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** just a product of my environment. The verse wasn't just a flex. It was a direct challenge. And Drake was right in the crossfire. Now, while Drake was still the most commercially successful rapper, Kendrick was reminding him, and the entire industry, that he was on a mission to take over. Drake, being Drake, stayed relatively quiet at first, but you could feel the heat building. Could Kendrick have been talking about him? And what would Drake's response be? Fans and commentators alike were on the edge of their seats, waiting for the next move. The language and the subtle tension. By 2014, tensions were slowly escalating, even though there was still no full-blown confrontation. But there was something else, a shift in the music. Kendrick's album, To Pimp a Butterfly, was released in 2015, and it was a musical masterpiece that transcended the usual rap beef territory. But in the background, you could feel that there was something unspoken between him and Drake. Then in 2015, Drake released the track The Language off his Nothing Was the Same album. While it wasn't directly aimed at Kendrick, it seemed to send a message. Drake wasn't going to back down from any challenge. The lyric, I just want the money, I ain't really into making friends, felt like it was alluding to the growing tension between them. Now, things weren't explicitly hostile, but both artists were on edge, and their fans knew it. The gloves were slowly starting to come off. Neither artist was willing to bow down to the other. The Summer 16 moment, the first full-scale shot across the bow. By 2016, the beef was starting to move into full-scale combat. Drake's Summer 16 track dropped, and fans immediately felt the shift. The line, "The throne is for the taking, watch me take it," was a statement to the world, and it seemed to have Kendrick's name all over it. For the first time, the words felt more personal, more targeted. This wasn't just about competition anymore. It was a challenge to Kendrick's position in the rap game. The gloves were off. The world was now waiting for Kendrick's response, and the anticipation was palpable. 2017, the tension reaches its peak. By 2017, both Kendrick and Drake were at the top of their game, but there was still a noticeable undercurrent of tension. The tension didn't just exist in interviews or lyrics. It was in the way their fans compared them. It was in the subtweets, the interviews, and the unspoken challenges. But then came Kendrick's Damn album, and it was clear that Kendrick had now elevated himself to a level where Drake wasn't even the focus anymore. Instead, Kendrick began to be seen as the cultural figurehead of hip-hop, with tracks like Humble showing his assertiveness. And even though Drake was still dominant in the mainstream, Kendrick's dominance in the lyrical and cultural realms could no longer be denied. The waiting game. What's next for the beef? Now, the tension between Kendrick and Drake has hit a strange point. Neither artist has fully addressed the conflict in any way that would close it off, leaving fans in a constant state of anticipation. But is it just a rivalry driven by the media and fans? Or is there something deeper at play? Will they continue to trade shots through their music? Or will the beef ultimately burn out? The history of their tension shows that Kendrick and Drake's feud isn't about a single moment or line. It's about two different visions for what hip-hop can be. Will it escalate to an all-out war? Or will both artists eventually move on to the next phase of their careers? And with both artists at their creative peaks, the real question is, will this beef become one of the defining stories of hip-hop, or will it be just another chapter in their ever-evolving careers? Drake's silence and calculated response. As we move deeper into the Kendrick versus Drake saga, we enter one of the most intriguing phases of this rivalry, Drake's silence. While Kendrick Lamar's Control verse sent shockwaves through the hip-hop world, and Kendrick's subsequent rise seemed to challenge Drake's position at the top, Drake did something unexpected. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he played the waiting game. Now, why would Drake, a man known for his calculated responses, his ability to dominate the airwaves with slick comebacks and viral moments, choose to remain silent? Was it a power move? Or was it something else? Let's break it down, because the silence itself speaks volumes. The power of silence, a calculated strategy. When Kendrick threw down the gauntlet with his Control verse, and later in his Humble track, everyone was watching to see how Drake would react. The world was expecting him to drop a diss track, or at the very least, fire off a few lines on social media. But nothing came. At first, it was a moment of intrigue. Why wasn't Drake responding? Fans couldn't help but speculate. Was he afraid? Was he stunned? Or was this simply a calculated move? Drake's strategy wasn't about reacting impulsively. It was about waiting and strategizing. By staying quiet, Drake did something far more profound. He allowed the tension to build. The longer he stayed silent, the more the stakes grew. Fans started to obsess over every little move he made, interpreting his interviews, social media posts, and even his musical choices as potential clues to his next move. It was almost as if Drake was playing 4D chess, making the whole world wait for the perfect moment to strike. The waiting game. The build-up to back-to-back. Drake's calculated silence didn't last forever, but the anticipation surrounding his eventual response reached a fever pitch. In 2015, after Kendrick's album, To Pimp a Butterfly, was released, it became clear that Kendrick was riding high with both fans and critics. But where was Drake? What was he planning? Everyone started to wonder. Was he going to let Kendrick's dominance go unchallenged? The answer came in a form no one expected. Drake wasn't going to fire off a diss track in the typical sense, with direct insults and barbs. He wasn't going to go the ether route. Instead, he crafted something far more subtle, far more calculated. It wasn't about a song, it was about a moment. Enter the infamous back-to-back. But before we get there, let's explore just how much Drake's silence built the anticipation for this moment. The subtle jabs, social media, and interviews. While Drake's silence might have been deafening when it came to direct confrontations, it wasn't like he was completely absent from the conversation. In fact, he was dropping subtle hints here and there in his interviews, in his social media, and even in his music. One of the key moments to note was Drake's response to Kendrick's Control verse in his track, The Ride, from his 2011 album, Take Care. It wasn't an overt response, but there was a line that fans immediately latched onto. I'm just trying to do it all. I ain't worried about the next man. This line didn't name Kendrick, but it was clear Drake wasn't worried about competition. At least he was trying to give off that impression. Then, in 2014, during an interview on The Breakfast Club, Drake subtly teased how he never felt the need to respond to Kendrick directly. He didn't call Kendrick out, but he did comment on how his approach was always to be more about the music than the drama. He carefully crafted this narrative of staying above the fray, positioning himself as someone who doesn't need to engage in petty beefs to remain on top. But the longer he stayed quiet, the more fans were drawn into the mystery. People were waiting for the next move, and the world of hip-hop was hanging on his every word. Back to back, the response we didn't see coming. Then came 2015, a year that changed everything. After Drake's long stretch of quiet moments, he unleashed back to back in the midst of his feud with Meek Mill. But here's the thing. Everyone thought this was just a Meek Mill diss track, but there was more to it. Back to Back wasn't just a diss track. It was a strategic message. Not only to Meek, but to everyone watching, including Kendrick. In this track, Drake didn't come out swinging with cheap shots or petty insults. No, he went for the jugular with surgical precision, and it was delivered with an air of effortlessness that only made the line sharper. But what does this have to do with Kendrick? Well, let's be real. Drake knew that Kendrick was paying attention. The momentum around Back to Back caught fire, and suddenly, Kendrick's silence was starting to look more like an open invitation. What made Back to Back so impactful wasn't just the punchlines or the catchy hook. It was the fact that Drake's response was both subtle and calculated. He didn't need to engage in a public war of words. By choosing to go after Meek in a track that would eventually become a classic, he sent a message to Kendrick and everyone else in the game. I'm here. And when I strike, you'll know it. The bigger picture, mastering control of the narrative. By playing the waiting game, Drake had done something remarkable. He had controlled the narrative. Instead of rushing into a quick diss track or an overblown confrontation, Drake's decision to remain silent allowed Kendrick's actions to take center stage. It was almost like Drake was letting Kendrick think he was in control, only for him to swoop in at the perfect moment, when the world had been waiting with bated breath. And here's the thing, Drake's silence wasn't weakness. It was masterful strategy. He didn't need to give Kendrick the satisfaction of a direct confrontation. Instead, he let Kendrick's rise build his own narrative, while Drake quietly laid the groundwork for his next move. And when that move came, it hit harder than anyone could have predicted. The anticipation builds. What's next? At this point in the saga, the tension between Kendrick and Drake is palpable. But here's the twist. After Back to Back and the Meek Mill feud, the nature of the beef began to shift. Drake didn't need to continue the beef with Kendrick in the same way he had with Meek. Instead, the silence became a tool of power, one that Drake used to maintain his status at the top without needing to battle it out in the public eye. So, what comes next for Kendrick and Drake? Is the silence a precursor to a final showdown? Or will it remain an unspoken tension that keeps fans on the edge of their seats for years to come? The anticipation is still building, and Drake's calculated response has set the stage for whatever happens next. Drake's response. The moment Drake finally responded, after what felt like an eternity of waiting, was nothing short of legendary. And when he did, it wasn't just a typical diss track. It was a masterclass in how to handle a rivalry, how to manipulate public perception, and how to claim victory, all while maintaining your cool and sense of style. So, how did he do it? Let's break down the payoff, not just the music itself, but everything surrounding it. The masterstroke. Back to Back. We've all heard it. The haunting hook. The punchlines that still echo in hip-hop culture today. Back to Back wasn't just a diss track. It was a strategic weapon that elevated Drake's response to legendary status. Now, let's talk about why this response was so calculated. When Drake released Back to Back, he did something that completely changed the landscape of rap beefs. He didn't just aim to destroy Meek Mill with vicious bars. He did something far more impactful. He made the response feel effortless. It wasn't an angry rant. It wasn't a lyrical hurricane. It was a cold, calculated strike. Every line was designed to hit with precision, like a surgical operation. Each line a small incision into Meek's ego. But here's the thing about Back to Back. It wasn't just a track aimed at Meek. It was a statement to Kendrick Lamar, and more broadly, to anyone else who thought they could take down Drake from the top. So, the question is, how did this move affect the dynamic between Drake and Kendrick? The power of subtlety, the psychological play. The beauty of Back to Back lies in the subtle psychological warfare it employed. In hip-hop, the expectation for a diss track is that it's going to be violent, raw, and full of venom. But Drake took a different route. Instead of the usual blistering attack, Drake's approach was more like a well-placed jab that made you wince without expecting it. He didn't need to go all out on Meek Mill. He simply needed to be cool, calm, and collected. Now, why does this matter in the context of Kendrick versus Drake? While Kendrick was dropping knowledge and challenging the game with his lyrical ferocity, Drake chose to stay above the drama. He didn't need to engage directly with Kendrick. By releasing Back to Back, he sent a message. I don't have to scream. I don't have to yell. I can win quietly and effortlessly. And make no mistake, this approach to the beef changed the way the public viewed him. Where Kendrick's aggressive approach had won him street cred and respect, Drake's calm, collected mastery earned him more power in the public eye. And the best part? He didn't even need to target Kendrick directly to do it. The public's reaction, the impact of a cultural moment. Let's rewind and think about the public reaction to the release of Back to Back. The track was an instant sensation. People couldn't stop talking about it. But what's fascinating about Drake's response is that it wasn't just about diss tracks and bars. It was about culture. When the song dropped, the internet exploded. Social media was flooded with memes, reaction videos, and endless commentary. It became the soundtrack of the summer. Fans of Drake were celebrating his brilliance, while Meek Mill supporters were left trying to scramble to make sense of the situation. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The real magic of Back to Back wasn't just in the bars themselves, but in the cultural impact it had. The way Drake used the public narrative, how he embraced the spotlight, and how he turned a potentially negative situation into an iconic moment. The Back to Back moment wasn't just a diss, it was a cultural shift. And here's the kicker. Kendrick, who had been quiet up until this point, was now in a situation where he had to consider whether or not to engage. Drake's response was so flawless, it forced everyone to acknowledge his dominance in a new way. Kendrick's role, the unanswered question. Now, let's get into the real intrigue of this saga. Kendrick Lamar's response, or more accurately, his lack of response, to Back to Back. Kendrick, known for his sharp wit and the ability to tear down his competition, had been uncharacteristically quiet in the face of Drake's calculated attack. This silence raised so many questions. Why didn't Kendrick fire back? Was he strategizing? Or was he simply not worried about Drake? Here's where things get fascinating. Kendrick's refusal to engage might have been just as strategic as Drake's response. By staying silent, Kendrick avoided the trap that many others in the rap game fall into. He knew that the game wasn't about responding to every insult. It was about making sure that your name stays in the conversation without having to prove anything. This is the power of silence in a world that thrives on spectacle. Yet, this only made Drake's victory that much clearer. Kendrick, for all his acclaim and street credibility, had become a passive spectator to Drake's calculated moves. The silence gave Drake even more control over the narrative. And with that came the ultimate payoff. Drake didn't just win the battle with back-to-back, he won the game. The aftermath. Analyzing the long-term effects. Now that the dust has settled, we can look back at the lasting impact of Drake's response. Back-to-back didn't just defeat Meek Mill. It sent a clear message to the entire rap world. Drake wasn't just the king of pop rap. He was the king of strategic dominance. What followed was a series of chart-topping singles, album releases, and industry dominance. But more than that, Drake showed the world how to win a war without throwing a single punch. He used strategy, timing, and cultural awareness to outplay everyone else in the game. As for Kendrick, the silence remained deafening. Even as the years passed, there was no true follow-up from him on back-to-back. Kendrick had already proven his worth in the game, and his silence was likely a testament to the fact that he didn't need to engage in every battle to remain the top dog. Still, the fact that Drake's response was so monumental means that Kendrick's lack of response didn't just leave a void. It left an opening that made Drake's victory seem inevitable. The final takeaway: why it still matters today. Looking back at this saga, it's clear that Drake's response was more than just a moment. It was a movement. The way he handled the situation, the way he used his silence, the way he waited for the perfect moment to strike, it all speaks to how Drake has mastered the art of winning without ever getting dirty. He didn't need to throw insults. He didn't need to engage in a full-on battle. What he did was something more profound. He took control of the entire narrative. In the end, this wasn't just about Drake and Kendrick. It was about a masterclass in narrative control and strategic dominance. And this is why, when we look at Drake's career, this feud remains one of the most fascinating examples of how to rise above the drama, still claim victory, and maintain the throne. The bigger picture: what happens next? As we wrap up this saga between two of the most influential artists in modern hip-hop, Drake and Kendrick Lamar, it's impossible not to wonder what happens next. The tension between them might have settled, but the larger questions remain unanswered. Is this the end of their rivalry? Or is it just the calm before an even bigger storm? Let's take a step back, look at the bigger picture, and see what might be lurking just around the corner. The resurgence of competitive rap, a new era. Hip-hop has always been a space where competition breeds greatness. From Nas versus Jay-Z to Tupac versus Biggie, rap beefs have often sparked some of the most unforgettable music in history. But when we think about the Drake versus Kendrick rivalry, something deeper emerged. It wasn't just about who could rap better. It was about who could control the culture. It was about legacy, dominance, and perception. Now here's where it gets interesting. As we move forward in the world of hip-hop, there's a shift happening. The public, fans, and the industry are all moving towards a new era of competition, where it's not just about one artist besting another, but about who can define the future of rap. Drake and Kendrick both stand at the forefront of this change, each with their own unique approach to the game. But what if they're both playing chess, and we're only seeing the first few moves? Drake's future. What lies ahead? For Drake, the question isn't just whether he'll continue to dominate. It's about what his legacy will look like when it's all said and done. We've seen him evolve from a young, emotional rapper into a global icon, navigating controversies, beefs, and the changing tides of the music industry. But with the rise of newer artists like Lil Baby, Travis Scott, and even J. Cole, the landscape of hip-hop is shifting once again. So, what's next for Drake? Could we see him enter new territory, away from his comfort zone of melodic rap and pop hits? We know that Drake's genius lies in his ability to adapt and transcend genres, But could he go even further and reinvent his sound entirely? Think about it. What if Drake, now secure in his position, started pushing boundaries like never before, experimenting with sounds, collaborating with underground artists, or taking risks that might shock the world? Is there a world where he evolves even further to remain relevant? Or does he play it safe and risk fading into the background? Kendrick Lamar's return, the silent storm. As for Kendrick Lamar, the quiet force in this rivalry, his next move is just as intriguing. Kendrick has already proven that he can step into the rap arena and dominate without even needing to say much. We've seen him disappear from the scene for months, even years, only to return with a project that shatters expectations and takes the rap world by storm. Is Kendrick plotting his next major statement? What if this silence we've experienced isn't just peaceful contemplation, but the calm before the storm? Kendrick's calculated absence only builds the intrigue. When will he strike again? Consider the possibility that Kendrick may not want to engage in direct beefs anymore. Instead, he might go for something even more ambitious. A multi-layered, conceptual album that challenges both Drake and the entire rap industry in one swift move. Maybe Kendrick's next project will redefine what we understand as hip-hop, pushing the boundaries of both lyricism and genre. Could we see him fuse poetry, jazz, or experimental sound into his work in ways that leave Drake and others scrambling to catch up? The next time Kendrick speaks, will it be a diss? Or will it be a complete reinvention of how he engages with the culture? The fateful collaboration, Drake and Kendrick, together? But here's where it gets even more suspenseful. Imagine this scenario. What if Drake and Kendrick, two of the biggest names in hip-hop today, put aside their rivalry and work together? Could you picture it? A joint album, the ultimate collaboration between two artists who've shaped the landscape of rap in the 21st century. What if, after all the tension, they decide to create something that defines a new era of hip-hop? They could combine their strengths, Drake's ear for mainstream hooks and Kendrick's ability to create deep, socially conscious narratives, and create a project that would push boundaries and set the industry on fire. Think of the massive cultural impact that would have. Could this be the ultimate form of dominance? Not by outshining each other, but by uniting the best of both worlds to shape the next phase of rap. Would fans even be ready for such a collab? The idea alone is enough to keep everyone on the edge of their seats. The new generation. Who will rise? But let's not forget about the new wave of artists rising up in the rap game. As much as Drake and Kendrick dominate the conversation today, the future of hip-hop is still being written. New talents are emerging, each one with their own unique take on the genre. Artists like Lil Baby, Pusha T, Travis Scott, and J. Cole, they're all quietly positioning themselves to lead the next era of rap. This is the big question we all need to ask. What role will Drake and Kendrick play in this shifting landscape? Will they remain the ones calling the shots, or will they pass the torch to these new leaders of the pack? The ultimate cliffhanger, the final question. And here's where we end this chapter. But the story is far from over. The question that remains, the one that leaves us all on the edge of our seats, is this. Will the tension between Drake and Kendrick continue to bubble beneath the surface, only to explode again when we least expect it? Or have we witnessed the end of this era, and we're about to enter a new chapter in rap history, one where both artists evolve into something completely unexpected? There's no way to know for sure. What we do know is this. The game is never truly over. There are always new players, new strategies, and new conflicts waiting to unfold. And whether it's Drake and Kendrick or the next generation of artists, it's clear that the world of hip-hop is far from stagnant. In fact, it's just getting started.